Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this Wednesday. It's the 15th of March, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information for your safety in your community and your village. You can easily do that by calling 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line. And you'll hear a series of prompts that'll guide you to your forecast. If you write those numbers down, the next time you can just punch them right in and it'll go a little bit faster. Weather.gov/Alaska is our statewide website, and if you click on that, it'll lead you to your local forecast. Or if you'd like to start a little more local, head to weather.gov/Fairbanks, weather.gov/Anchorage, or weather.gov/Juneau. Each one of those places is the representation of us online for your weather forecast office in your region. nws.ar.tv weather at noaa.gov is a great way to find information from the TV desk and get some help if you can't find what you're looking for online, on the phone, or just over the NOAA Weather Radio. We're happy to help anytime. Always find us on Facebook and Twitter as well. Juneau and Fairbanks have been sending out a lot of information lately there. Twitter.com is the place to go. Look for NWS Juneau or NWS Fairbanks or, of course, NWS Anchorage. Hazardous weather tonight is really confined to two spots. It's going to be around the Alaska Range for cold and windy conditions. The wind working with the temperature. It's already cold in some of those mountain passes and around the Denali region. It could make it feel as cold as 45 to 50 below. The wind chill advisory will continue until early Friday morning in those regions. For the northern parts of southeast, winter storm warnings have been dropped now for many areas around the Taku Inlet and northward, but the snow continues to fall around the Haynesboro out toward Gustavus and Glacier Bay. As a result, you may see as much as 4 inches of snow or perhaps another 1 inch of snow. That'll go through about 10 o'clock tonight, and look for snow showers to continue to add a little bit more to what you already have on the ground. So another 1 to 4 possible in that range as we go through the rest of the evening hours, and maybe you'll get a little bit of a break later tonight. Here's a look at the satellite picture, and here's the reason you're not getting a break right now. Low pressure sitting across the central and eastern Gulf of Alaska. It's been that way all week long, hasn't it? And that onshore flow is bringing moisture right up through the panhandle. A lot of that has been rain to snow on and off again, and bands after bands after bands have been working up from south central or south, let's say the central parts of southeast, that's what I'm trying to say, and moving those right into the higher terrain of northern parts of the panhandle. So no surprise, you got another one moving through as we hold through the rest of the evening hours there. So another 1 to 4 inches again possible, generally from Glacier Bay to the Haynesboro and northward. Out across the west into Prince William Sound and South Central, it's a considerably different story there, especially the further west you go into Cook Inlet. That's dragging all of that very dry air out of the interior and channeling it through the Alaska Range, bringing that cold wind through cold temperatures, and again making that wind chill, or feels like index, feel even colder than it actually is. The air continues to pour down through Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait, and you can see how it's really cleared out a lot of the clouds, but once it hits the mountains again around Kodiak and the hills there, you can see the clouds forming once again, and in the lee of the Alaska Range, the cloud streets that are forming there are just simply amazing to watch if you have a chance to look at it on satellite at your own leisure. Now, across the interior, a lot of what you're seeing here is just the cold air sitting across the Yukon and Kuskokwim River valleys. Up north, not a whole lot going on there. Generally clear conditions from time to time. The North Slope has seen some fog thanks to high pressure being in charge all the way around the Arctic Ocean. Closer to Alaska anyway. You can see the effects of high pressure here across the Bering, also pushing northerly winds right down the west coast. But things are going to change a little bit as the ridge shifts a little bit more to the east. That's going to keep the west coast under the northerly flow, but it's going to start bringing in some southerly winds out across the central and northern Bering Sea. So why does that matter? Well, if you can see clearly here on the satellite picture, we're picking out the ice edge on the infrared satellite here in this case. This has been descending or moving southward closer and closer to St. Paul, about 35 to 45 nautical miles now, and some of the strips have been breaking off that and moving closer to the islands. But now, with a southerly wind, a lot of those strips will be pushed closer and closer to that main higher concentration pack. So things are gradually changing there, and slightly warmer air, if nothing else than a wind shift, will change the weather out across the central Bering. Here's a look at the weather map. Low pressure sitting at 986 millibars, and by mid-afternoon we are looking at rain in central and southern parts of the Panhandle and continued snow showers across northern parts of southeast. Much drier conditions, though, seen across the central and western Gulf today. You can see how those clouds have really been eroded. There were a few areas of snow around Kodiak and the northern end of the island there on the western side of the Alaska Range, and then generally dry conditions as you head up north there. Some snow showing up on the mountains and a little bit of cloud cover across central and western Yukon. Low clouds across some parts of the northern slope, and then high pressure across the Bering, anywhere from 1,029 to about 1,030 millibars. By tonight, there's a possibility of some light snow moving across eastern Siberia and the Gulf of Anadyr. That might approach western sections of St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait. You'll see that play out over the next couple days, generally traveling from southwest to north and east. That's all in that southerly moving wind that's wrapping around the west side of that high pressure ridge. Fog will be possible across the Arctic Ocean, and low pressure will continue across the central Gulf. Now, if you just look at this map and take it as drawn, it looks like there's a lot of precipitation there, and that's really not going to be the case. There's going to be hit and miss snow showers and periods of snow across the central and northern parts of southeast, and some periods of rainfall as you head further south. But as far as widespread, solid, or torrential even, rain or snow, not the case, so please don't read it quite like that. As we get into Thursday, again, showery conditions of rain and snow will continue across southeast. You may have some snow showers in the morning, but all in all, again, it looks like hit and miss, passing wet and snowy weather across the Gulf as low pressure continues to kind of spread and fan out a little bit more across the central and southern parts of the Gulf. Across the Cook Inlet region and most of Kodiak Island, you're likely going to see colder winds draining out of the Alaska Range. High pressure's in charge of that, and that's what we find across the interior. Again, generally clear and dry conditions there all the way out into southwestern Alaska. There's that band of snow that's trying to work its way across eastern Siberia. It may get a little bit closer to the western end of the Seward Peninsula and Wales. Up north, fog still possible across the north slope and mainly the coastal areas and offshore. And then out across the west, you can see rain trying to build in. What would that be? That's another front coming in from the North Pacific. But remember, it still has to punch through high pressure that's sitting across southwestern Alaska and Bristol Bay. As a result of that moving around a little bit, you can see the snow showers in that unsettled part of the weather pattern across the Bering sneaking in a little bit more to Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, and even the Chukchi Coast. And low pressure across the central chain is getting a little bit further north as well. That'll bring a stouter, more southerly flow into the central and western chain, better chance of rain there, and maybe some gales. And then across the eastern Gulf, we're still dealing with this very slow-moving weather maker at 995 millibars. It still has a southerly push. It still has moisture, and this still is not going to be wall-to-wall rain and snow across the Gulf. So again, passing rain and snow showers there, dry conditions out to the west. Here's a look at temperatures today. You'll notice that many in southeast actually had a generally milder day compared to the rest of the state. Upper 30s and lower 40s there, 41 in the capital city, 44 around 41, I should say, around Ketchikan and Craig. And as you get out toward Klawock, temperatures were a little cooler at 40 degrees, 35 in Sitka, 31 in Yakutat, 37 in Hyder. 20s and 30s for Prince William Sound. Whittier was 15, 17 in Kenai, 22 in Homer, 19 in Seward. It was 20 in Talkeetna, teens and 20s around Anchorage into the Matanuska and Susitna valleys. 2 in Eagle, 4 in Northway, 1 in Tok, 6 degrees around Fairbanks today. Fort Yukon was showing 5, 15 below in Anaktuvuk Pass, 8 below in Kaktovik, anywhere from 10 to 15 below from Barrow down to Atkasuk. Wainwright was 10 below. Kotzebue Sound had Kivalina at 12 below, 6 below in Shishmaref, 7 below in Kotzebue, 4 above around Nome today. And let's see, Unalakleet was 2 below. Galena had 6 above. Amanak was about 8 degrees. 11 around Sabunga and Gamble, not too far behind today. 15 for Nunivak Island. 2 in Bethel, and southwest temps range from 5 around Cape Newenham to 12 in King Salmon, and 18 in Dillingham, with 11 at Lake Iliamna. Teens and 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, Cold Bay around 21, 32 for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, upper 20s for St. Paul and St. George, with 41 at Atka, 37 in Adak, 41 out around Shemya today. Overnight low temperatures are going to still be fairly cold across the interior, anywhere from 15 to 30 below in many cases. We're talking about 16 below in Fairbanks, 19 below for Arctic Village, 15 to 30 below for the North Slope. Look at Atkasuk at 29 below. Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse also around 25 below. The Kotzebue Sound region from 15 to as cold as 30 below as you get up around Cape Lisburne. Look at that, some seriously cold weather there. 17 below around Nome. Looks like Russian Mission are about 7 below. Denali and Healy close to 20 below tonight. Hovering fairly close to 0 around the Bristol Bay region until you get south of Port Hayden. As you get out toward Pilot Point, you're looking at temps back in the mid to upper teens. 22 around St. Paul and St. George, 24 in Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. Kodiak, 22 tonight. A high of 26 tomorrow. Southeast back in the mid to upper 30s. A few places out toward Ketchikan and probably Craig. You're looking at readings a little bit closer to 38 to 40 degrees. 38 in Sitka, mid 30s for Juneau. Upper 20s to lower 30s for Prince William Sound. 20 around the Matanuska and Susitna Valley and Anchorage. 0 for Fairbanks today, or tomorrow I should say, closer to 6 degrees. As you get out toward Ambler and Bettles, about 5 to 10 below during the day. Anywhere from about 10 to 20 below for the North Slope. Kotzebue Sound temperatures about 5 to 10 degrees above 0. 7 in Nome. Bethel, you're looking at 3, 32 around Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. On to flying weather now. IFR conditions, of course, are expected to continue around the northern parts of the Panhandle thanks to snow tomorrow. MVFR to start for a good chunk of the inside passages there for southeast, and then IFR across the northern Gulf. Also watching for IFR just to the west of St. Lawrence Island and west of the chain. MVFR for many areas there across southwestern Alaska, including Bethel in the morning. Now, as you get into the afternoon, that should improve a little bit. Watch for MVFR conditions around Seward and just offshore, with IFR wrapping around low pressure. Their conditions should improve in northern parts of southeast, and IFR conditions from St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait up to just about Cape Lisburne there, and also south of the western chain. MVFR continues for places like St. Paul and St. George. Here's your pass conditions. Then Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, we expect pretty good visibility throughout the day. Looking for VFR in both of those regions. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we're going to say VFR for right now. It may still be breezy, if not blustery, through Rainy Pass, and for Windy Pass, of course. As we look a little bit toward Isabel, VFR conditions expected there. You may find MVFR conditions around Mentasta Pass through the majority of the day there, so keep an eye on that. Tanita Pass, we're expecting VFR conditions throughout the day. Portage Pass looks pretty good. You'll find lower visibility, though, if you're going across the Sound. And Chilkoot and White Pass, again, looking for some improvements, but a start at IFR should be expected in the morning. Surface freezing lines there still hovering across central and northern parts of southeast, and then taking a big jog southward. Here's that warmer air trying to work its way back in on that very slight southerly wind. It'll pick up a little bit more as we head into Friday, so watch for those levels to move northward as we get into the rest of the week and the weekend. Icing potential, the moisture's been pretty sparse. I mean, it's certainly there. You've gotten snow across northern and central parts of southeast, and certainly rainfall in other places. But as far as concentrated, really cold stuff, it's fairly thin and not ever present, I guess I should say. So throughout the better part of tomorrow, the general vicinity of icing potential ranges from the Copper River Basin to central and southern parts of southeast, anywhere from about 3,000 to 4,000 feet and above, generally light. And then St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait, anywhere below 10,000 feet, you could find light to isolated moderate there. Here's the jet stream, and you'll notice this is a little different than we've seen for the last couple days. We've got low pressure here across the North Pacific, another low that has not moved across the Gulf of Alaska, and then our high pressure ridge is kind of leaning back a little bit more to the west, and as a result, we're changing the wind pattern here. But the core, the really big meat and potatoes stuff that's driving the really active weather, is still fairly down to the south, anywhere from 105 to 140 knots south of the jet that's affecting Alaska. At 9,000 feet, you can see low pressure here across the Gulf, and then the high is sitting across the eastern chain. That's guiding those northerly winds down the west coast and over Bristol Bay. Light westerlies moving across the north, and then northerlies through the interior as well, 30 to 40 knots there. For southeast, Generally east and southeasterly winds moving up through the panhandle, again guiding in that moisture that's keeping snow going tonight across the northern peninsula. Winds are a little stronger at 3,000 feet, 25 to 30 knots here across the panhandle. Northerlies helping to drain out that cold through Cook Inlet and over Kodiak Island in the Matanuska and Susitna valleys. No doubt you've noticed that again today. Northerlies across the west coast, 15 to 20 knots here at 3,000 feet. Westerlies are still working across the north slope, about 10 to 15 knots. Our high pressure ridge is sitting across the eastern chain, and on the west side of that return flow from the south is ranging from 40 to as strong as 65 knots there. So we'll be keeping an eye on that, and you'll see that reflected in your marine weather forecast here in just a bit. Turbulence potential really doesn't look a whole lot different than yesterday. In fact, I didn't do much to change this map. It is a pretty similar story, anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 feet across the northern side of the Alaska Range, and then we get into a stronger, bumpier flow here all the way across southwest and into the Alaska Peninsula below 6,000 feet. Also watching for some of those winds, those little mini jets or extra pushes of air across the northern Gulf, around Prince William Sound and around the Barren Islands into Shelikof Strait. Watch for some of that. Also watching for a little bit of chop across the central, northern, and southern parts of southeast and across the central and western chain. That's a look at your aviation forecast. In just a few minutes, I'll be back with a look at the sea ice edge as well as your marine weather forecast. Stay tuned. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Cindy Preller. She is the Tsunami Program Manager for the National Weather Service in Alaska region. Thanks for joining us again, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
We're talking about tsunami awareness and safety here in Alaska especially, and one of the things that has been one of your main focuses is the Tsunami Ready program. What is that, and how do Alaskans find out more?
Awesome. Yeah, Tsunami Ready is a National Weather Service hosted program in partnership with Storm Ready.
Okay.
And it is a program that we conduct with our partners in the state, but it's mostly community driven. So if a community wants to become tsunami ready, well, the first thing they need to do is get a hold of me or their local WCM at a weather forecast office or their tsunami team at the state level.
So, and this is something that's a NOAA grant, so there's money available to help encourage the preparedness at the local level there in the city or the village.
Yeah.
What are some of the places that have done this already?
Oh, our oldest tsunami ready city is Seward,
Good.
you know, but also Sitka, Homer, Valdez are the, you know, the main players, but we've got several tsunami ready communities that I'm very proud of. It takes several years to accomplish this. And so a few of the things that they do is the tsunami risk will be assessed by someone like me or another scientist will help find out, you know, really what their probability is. We'll create an inundation map, an evacuation map. They'll have a mitigation plan. We will set up some partnerships with the schools, make an evacuation shelter, and then they need to practice. But it is the city that owns the program, really. It's up to them. And many cities would like to have sirens, and so we help them get those, and, you know, and they practice. They have to practice.
Sure. So let's say I'm driving into a place like Seward that's tsunami ready. What are some of the things I should look for as maybe a visitor so I know maybe where I need to go or can be more aware of my tsunami risk?
Absolutely. The tsunami ready signage is really blatant. It's this, you know, blue and white curling wave sign, and there's different shapes of signs that'll show you if you are in the hazard zone or where the evacuation routes are and when you're out of shelter.
Okay. So this is a multi-step process that helps the residents be more aware of their own risk, but then also prepare for when that risk arrives.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, many communities sound their sirens daily, some sound them weekly, you know, to make sure everybody knows what they mean. And there's often drills. We have an annual drill once a year. We have Tsunami Awareness Preparedness Week, and that's a good time for each community to do some exercising.
Okay. And is this a program that is unique to Alaska?
Absolutely not. It's national.
Okay.
And all over the country, you'll have the same signage, so it's consistent.
Good. So if I'm taking the kids to California, I should be able to see something familiar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, some communities hesitate because they think it'll discourage tourism. And so I would like to tell those communities that what they're actually doing is they're encouraging responsibility.
Sure.
The tsunami's going to happen.
Right.
And it's going to hit every coastline. So, you know, it's not about when, it'll be any time. So the fact that they're showing tourists that they are making steps to be prepared for this, I think would encourage people to want to stay there.
Right, and that would be no different than, say, you or I visiting the Midwest, where we know there's going to be really bad thunderstorms and maybe there's a risk for tornadoes. We're aware of that risk when we go there.
Absolutely. If I see a sign for a tornado shelter, I'm going to remember that.
Right. Okay. All right. So we're just doing a better job of being more prepared with something that's bound to happen again.
I hope so.
Okay. Very good. Where can people go again to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program here in Alaska?
Well, one, there is a Tsunami Ready website. So, you know, just Tsunami Ready, and
Google
that'll
Tsunami
get you
Ready.
there.
Okay.
And then probably the best person for people to contact is their warning coordination meteorologist at their local weather forecast office, which is Anchorage or Juneau, most likely.
Okay. All right. So most of the folks along the Bering Sea coast, again, are not at a huge risk for tsunamis.
No, they don't need to worry about it.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. But always learning to be prepared no matter where you are in Alaska, no matter what the risk, always a good step. And tsunami is a major player in that, as we well know from events like 1964. Okay.
Alaskans are resilient. I really believe in them.
Very good, very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for joining us again, and please make an effort to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program in your village and town if you haven't already. We'll be back with Cindy again next time to talk more about the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. We actually have a group of geologists working for the National Weather Service, so scratch your head on that one and we'll join you next time. I'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Packs. Here's an update on today's Sea Ice Edge. You can find this anytime online at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Not only will it show you a picture that has the concentration levels across the Bering Sea and Cook Inlet, but it will also have the thickness, which is the other part of the puzzle. It's not just how much ice is there, but how thick is that ice. Here's a look at the Bering, and you can see almost a Nunivak Island-sized polynya shaping up on the south side. Why? The ice is moving southward and being pushed in that direction. You'll notice a fairly large opening here across the southern Bering Sea into parts of Bristol Bay. Chances are this isn't going to fill in a whole lot more because sea surface temperatures are warmer in this area and we're developing that southerly wind. So you're looking here at St. Paul and saying, wow, that's getting a lot closer. Yeah, that's about 35 to 45 nautical miles to the north and northeast. So chances are you've been seeing some ice strips moving away from that. However, with the return of those southerly winds, we're going to start pushing those strips a little bit closer to that main ice pack and that concentration that's above 80% there. So anytime you want to check this out, I encourage you to do so. You can also get a 5-day forecast and the seasonal outlook anytime at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice, and they're happy to help you find what you need anytime. Here's a look at southeast, and northerlies coming down through the Lynn Canal at 20 knots will produce 4-foot seas there. That'll continue on into Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait looking at more of a southeasterly flow at 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. Outer coast winds running around 20 to 25. As you get up toward Cape Fairweather and Icy Cape, that becomes more of a stronger easterly flow offshore at 35 knots with a 10-foot sea. For Friday, broader easterly winds shape up all the way from Sitka up toward the northern Gulf, 20 to 30 knots there with 7 to 9-foot seas. Southerlies offshore of Craig and Klawock as you get into the Clarence Strait. Southeasterlies at 25 continue with 5-foot seas. Northerlies coming down from the Lynn Canal all the way through Stevens Passage. 5-foot seas on that 25-knot wind for Friday. For South Central, northerlies inside of Prince William Sound with a 5-foot sea. The winds pick up even more as you get out toward the Barren Islands and eastward and east of Kodiak Island, 45 knots with a 13-foot sea. Winds will be working down the Cook Inlet, 20 to 30 knots. Northwesterlies for Shelikof Strait and west of the Barrens at 35 knots with 10 to 13-foot seas there. Winds diminish a little bit as you head into Friday. Across the western Gulf, 20 to 30 knots. Prince William Sound down to 15 knots, 10 knots from the east across northern Cook Inlet. Northerlies, Cook Inlet southward from Callaghan Island, and northwesterlies inside Shelikof Strait and west of the Barrens, 25 to 30 with 5 to 10-foot seas in that region. Over Bristol Bay, northerlies at 35 knots over the ice down the coast, 30 knots from the north with a 9-foot sea. 45 to 50-knot winds are expected across Castle Cape to Chignik and then down towards Sand Point and King Cove. Again, that very concentrated and highly packed pressure gradient helping to move a lot of air across these regions. Watch those gaps and passes as well, because you will see higher gusts in that region. As we get into Friday, northeasterlies continue inside of Bristol Bay. Those diminish to 15 knots. Easterlies down the coast and 25 to 30 knots across the Pacific coast with 7 to 9-foot seas there on Friday. So things do improve. Across Thursday in the eastern chain, northeasterly winds north of Unalaska and Nikolsky with 4-foot seas, 5-foot seas to the south on more of a northerly flow. And then it's southeasterly winds for the central and western chain, anywhere from 20 to as high as 40 knots, 13 to 17-foot seas there out across the west. Watch what happens on Friday. Winds start to pick up here south of Adak and Atka, 40 to 45 knots. Winds up to 25 to 30 across the eastern chain, 6 to 7-foot seas there, 25-foot seas south of Adak and Atka, and about the same for the western chain, 40 to 45 there on Friday. As that frontal boundary is working its way northward, that flow across your region will start to pick up as well. For the west coast, southerlies make their way north of Nunivak Island to St. Lawrence Island, 20 knots, 4-foot seas around St. Matthew in the open waters there, 2-foot seas for the Pribilofs as your winds are starting to change around. We'll keep the northerlies, though, for the Kuskokwim Bay region, 25 knots there, and that becomes northwesterly as high pressure shifts a little bit more and you get into a southeasterly flow for the Pribilofs. Westerlies remain generally light from St. Lawrence Island to St. Matthew, 15 knots, southwesterlies north of Nunivak Island, and 5-foot seas for the Pribilofs. Look for southerlies coming up through the Chukchi Sea, 10 to 20 knots, 25 knots off of Cape Lisburne and Point Hope, and south and westerly winds over the Beaufort Seacoast, 10 to 15 knots on Thursday, diminishing even more on Friday to 10 knots from more of a westerly flow, and south and southeasterly winds across the Chukchi Coast and outside of Kotzebue Sound, 15 knots for those regions on Friday. Let's recap tonight's weather. We're looking at winter weather advisories for the northern parts of southeast around the Haynesboro and into Glacier Bay. And that would include Gustavus and points north. We're looking for another 1 to as much as 4 inches of snow from those passing bands of snow showers there. Elsewhere, rain and snow showers for southern parts of southeast. And this is not going to be a widespread slog of moisture, but possible passing showers across the central and eastern Gulf as low pressure continues to sit in the same old place. High pressure across the northern, central, and western parts of the state will keep the sky generally clear, dry, and cold, pushing a lot of cold air over the Alaska Range, and that's where wind chill advisories are found around Denali and the eastern Alaska Range. And those gaps and passes, it could feel as cold as 45 to 50 below through Friday when that wind blows on you. So get into Friday, more dry weather there. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.